If you ask anyone in a management position in a business what the most difficult thing to do, what the most difficult part of their job is, the majority of us are going to tell you that it is hiring people, finding the right people for a certain position. It is hard to get a read on someone in a 1 or 2 hour job interview. It's similar to dating almost. The first couple of dates you go on with a woman, it's basically a job interview. You're asking the same introductory questions. Tell me about your past. Tell me about your family. Tell me about your kids. Blah, blah, blah. Same shit. The first 3 months of a new relationship is all about finding out about the other person that you're dating. After 3 months, the mask comes off and the real person becomes exposed. It is the same thing with a job. You hire someone. First 3 to 6 months that they're on the job, they're on their best behavior, and so are you. I love this job. Everything's going great. I'm going to be here till I retire. Yeah, until reality sets in. People begin to get comfortable with each other. And the company either realizes or you either realize that this is just not going to work out. Either way, the professional relationship is ending. It is no different in the NFL with the hiring of head coaches. Just like the draft, hiring an NFL coach is a crapshoot. It is a 50-50 proposition on whether or not it's going to work long term. Every year in the NFL, there's anywhere from 15 to about 25% turnover with head coaches. It is an unforgiving league. NFL head coaches get 2, maybe 3 years to prove that they can win. Some get fired after just 1 season. Usually, there are 1 or 2 coaching hires every year that are just baffling, questionable to say the least. Take Freddie Kitchens last year in Cleveland. The Browns hired him after the 2018 season. No one outside of Cleveland thought that that was a smart hire. I should say no one outside the Cleveland front office thought that that was a smart hire. The 5 head coaches that were hired earlier this year in the NFL, I think all 5 teams got it right. Whether or not any of these guys work out long term is anyone's guess, but I feel like all 5 head coaches fit the direction that their respective teams are going in. So what I'm going to do, we're going to look at each of the new head coaches and their teams and determine which head coach is going to have the toughest time this season and who will be the most successful in the first year. The list that I'm going to do is going to go in order from worst to first. I'm going to start with Ron Rivera and the Washington Redskins. Ron Rivera's first season in DC is going to be fucking hard. He came into this situation knowing that he was going to have to rebuild this team from scratch. The Redskins have been one of the most pathetic teams in the NFL since the 90s, save for 1 season that RG3 got them into the playoffs. Washington wasn't very active in free agency after Ron Rivera was hired, something that got him a lot of criticism, but I think it was the right call. They're not going to rebuild this team through free agency. He came in with the strategy, with the mindset that the Redskins were going to rebuild through the draft. And that just takes time. I thought they needed a quarterback. Obviously, Ron Rivera sees something in Dwayne Haskins that I don't. But the Redskins' other need was an edge rusher. And they got the best defender available in Chase Young. The Redskins, I think, will be better than they were last year. Which, I mean, that's not saying much since they were 3-13 last season, one of the worst teams in the league. There was nowhere to go but up. But it's still going to be a struggle for Ron Rivera, and he knows it. I think out of all 5 head coaches that were hired earlier this year, Ron Rivera is going to struggle the most in 2020. It is the first year of a rebuild in DC. No one is expecting much from the Redskins this year, which is why they have 0 games in prime time. It's going to be a make-or-break season, I think, for Dwayne Haskins. Sink or swim. I don't have much faith in him, but I'll admit, he was set up in a really shitty situation last year. He will be much better off with Ron Rivera guiding and developing him, but the Redskins, they're still going to finish 6-10, doubling their win total from last season, but Hardly a success. Number 4 on my list, Joe Judge and the New York Giants. It'll be a struggle for them as well, but the reason I put Joe Judge ahead of Ron Rivera in Washington is because I believe that Joe Judge at least has a potential franchise quarterback in Daniel Jones, and he's got a superstar running back in Saquon Barkley. Ron Rivera has what could be a future bum in Dwayne Haskins and a past his prime Adrian Peterson. Big difference. There are a lot of questions surrounding Joe Judge. Honestly, he was a surprising hire. Before the Giants hired him, he was largely a mystery. Still is. I had to look into his past to figure out what kind of coach that he has the potential to be. And his past, I'll admit, is pretty impressive. He coached under Nick Saban at Alabama, was part of 2 national championship teams. He was the special teams coordinator in New England under Bill Belichick, won 3 rings with the Patriots. He has learned under the greatest coach in college football and the greatest coach in the NFL. Hard to beat that pedigree. That being said, he has got a shitload of work to do in New York, and it is going to be a struggle this season. The Giants and the Redskins are very similar. Both young teams, both young quarterbacks, both bad defenses. I salute the Giants for hiring a guy that they felt could rebuild the franchise instead of hiring the new hot young signal caller or the new hot offensive coordinator, which has become the trend in the NFL the past few years. The thing about special teams coordinators that a lot of people don't pay attention to, they work all season with the bottom third of the roster, developing those guys. They work with both the offensive and defensive staffs, so they're very well-rounded. The Baltimore Ravens, they hired John Harbaugh when he only had experience as a special teams coordinator. I'd say it worked out pretty fucking well for them. He's one of the longest tenured coaches in the league right now. The defense is going to be an issue all year for the Giants. And they've got an unproven coordinator in Patrick Graham running the show. The front half of the schedule's brutal. Pittsburgh, Niners, Rams, Cowboys, Eagles, Tampa, all in the first 8 weeks. It eases up a bit the last half of the season. Giants are going to finish 6-10 in Mike Judge's first year. Not Mike Judge, Joe Judge's first year. Mike Judge, creator of King of the Hill. Next up, number 3, Kevin Stefanski and the Cleveland Browns. Listen, the Browns could go nowhere but up after they hired Freddie Kitchens after the 2018 season. The hiring of Kevin Stefanski could end up being the best coaching hire in Cleveland since the mid-1980s when they hired Marty Schottenheimer. I went back and forth between putting Stefanski here or Matt Rhule in Carolina. I had to put Kevin Stefanski because of one reason: Baker Mayfield. The Browns are going into this season with what I feel like is a question mark at the quarterback position. Stefanski is saying all of the right things in the media about Baker Mayfield, but I've got strong doubts as to whether or not he makes it to October as the starter. If Cleveland opens the season and Baker Mayfield is struggling, Case Keenum will be taking over. Don't forget, Kevin Stefanski and Case Keenum were together in Minnesota when they had that run to the NFC Championship a couple of years ago. So they've got history together. Statistically, the Browns' defense was bad last season, but they have a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. A lot of times last year, the Browns' defense was put in poor position because of the shitload of turnovers by Baker Mayfield and the offense. Kind of similar to what happened to the Tampa defense last year with Jameis Winston and all those turnovers. On paper, the Browns should be a playoff team. They should be one of the better teams in the NFL. On paper. Which was the case last year. If you didn't know that, just go back and listen to Baker Mayfield and the Browns all last summer. They will tell you. But this is the Cleveland fucking Browns we're talking about. I don't care what they look like on paper. This is an organization that is one slot ahead of the Cincinnati Bengals as being the worst franchise in the league. This organization is known for fucking things up every year. The 2 quarterback thing really concerns me. I know that they're saying Baker Mayfield's going to be the starter. Case Keenum's coming in to mentor him and back him up. I don't buy it. I like them bringing on Case Keenum. Don't get me wrong. I understand why they brought him in. You got to have Baker Mayfield insurance. But it creates a little bit of uncertainty. And it can cause a split in the locker room. It can cause players in the locker room to choose between Baker Mayfield or Case Keenum. Now, if you had this same situation in, say, New England or New Orleans, like they had it with Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Brees last year, wouldn't be a problem. But like I said, this is the Cleveland Browns we're talking about. At some point this season, I believe that we are going to see Case Keenum come in and become the starter. I could see the Browns actually opening the year 3-1, but completely fall apart after that. Finish the season 7-9. Let's get to Matt Rhule at number 2. This probably is a bit shocking to some of you, with Matt Rhule being ranked this high. Matt Rhule's the only newly hired coach with very little to no NFL experience. He was the assistant offensive line coach with the Giants for one season back in 2012. That is the extent of his experience in the NFL. The reason I have him so high on my list, unlike the 3 guys before him, Matt Rhule has a proven veteran at quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater. Carolina didn't have that bad of a roster last year. They just needed a fucking quarterback. Kyle Allen was a disaster. Now, I'm not saying the Panthers are going to go from worst to first this season. They're not going to be that big of a success. I still think that they could be last place in the NFC South. But I do feel like Matt Rhule can turn things around. He turned things around at Temple. Did the same at Baylor. Took Baylor from 1-11 in 2017 to 11-3 last season. Well, KC, how can you say that Matt Rhule is going to struggle less than the other 3 coaches when you think that the Panthers will finish last in the NFC South? Well, the NFC South is fucking loaded. You got Tom Brady in Tampa, Drew Brees in New Orleans, Matt Ryan in Atlanta. Falcons are going to be better. The NFC South is a loaded division. I think Matt Rhule will have it a bit easier than Ron Rivera, than Kevin Stefanski. I like the decision by Matt Rhule to bring in Joe Brady, who worked with Teddy Bridgewater for 2 years in New Orleans. They're familiar with each other. Teddy Bridgewater impressed me last year in the 5 games that he played in New Orleans. But that 5-game stretch can be a little bit misleading because the Saints' defense was unfucking believable. Those 5 games that Drew Brees was out. Best 5 games they played all season. The Panthers should not have trouble scoring. I mean, you got Christian McCaffrey. They got a good wide receiving core. You got Teddy Bridgewater. The issue in Carolina is going to be stopping other teams from scoring. Carolina's defense was god-awful last season, and they got progressively worse as the season moved on. They had several guys depart this offseason, which could be a good thing, but they are going to miss Luke Kuechly, who retired. He was the captain of that defense. He was one of the best fucking linebackers in the league. It's possible that Carolina is actually going to be worse defensively this year than they were last year. The NFC South is loaded, like I said a second ago. Saints, loaded. Tampa has Tom Brady. Atlanta should be better. Carolina, once again, is going to be the worst team in the division. But they are going to finish 7-9. They are going to be better this year than they were last year. And number 1 on the list, the only thing the Dallas Cowboys will be number 1 at this season is Mike McCarthy. This should be obvious. Mike McCarthy is the most successful coach in terms of the new hires. He inherits the best team of the 5 teams that hired new coaches. Now, that doesn't mean that his first season in Dallas is not going to be a struggle. It's just going to be a different type of struggle than the other 4 coaches. Before I get to that, let's remember, yes, Mike McCarthy has a stellar 1-loss record, 125, 77, and 2. Yes, he won a Super Bowl. But that was with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. Now, he's got the king of mediocrity, Dak Prescott. His last year or 2 in Green Bay, the Packers' offense struggled. They were down big time numbers-wise. Defenses in the NFL adapt quickly. And Mike McCarthy never revamped his offensive scheme. That was one of the reasons he and Aaron Rodgers argued so much. I believe that the biggest struggle that Mike McCarthy is going to have to deal with in Dallas his first season is the future of Dak Prescott. It looks like that they're not going to get a deal done by the mid-July deadline. And this situation, this Dak Prescott contract situation, is going to be a black cloud hanging over the Cowboys all season long, with the national media spotlight burning right over it. It was challenging, his final year in Green Bay, but his first season in Dallas could be the most challenging of his career. There's plenty of talent on this Cowboys roster, especially offensively. But NFL teams follow the lead of their quarterback. And like Dak Prescott, the Cowboys are mediocre damn near every year. Just like last year, I've got Dallas finishing 8-8. All right, that's all for today. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button for me. Click the notification bell to receive all updates from the channel. Appreciate you guys that have already done so. Leave me a comment in the section below. Let me know which new head coach will have the most success in 2020 and which one you think is going to struggle the most. Let me know your thoughts. You can follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. If you have any questions for me, email them to btlkc84@gmail.com. I will see you guys next time.